Hey lovely people, welcome back. Before we jump into today's wild story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the drama, the lessons, and the sweet karma. Now get comfortable, because this one is a ride. Sandra left me in a hospital bed at Grady Memorial in Atlanta, posted a picture of me in a paper gown to a family group chat, and told everybody I was finally somebody else's problem. Before the pain medicine wore off, she had emptied our joint account, let her boyfriend drive my car, and laughed in text messages while I stared at the ceiling with stitches in my side. She did not cry. She did not apologize. She did not even pretend to care. She made my worst day into a performance. Here's how it happened. My name is Mark Ellison, and before everything fell apart, I was the kind of black man who believed loyalty could hold a whole house together. I live with Sandra in East Point, just outside Atlanta, in a brick ranch with a squeaky front door and creaky floors that always announced you before you entered. I worked long shifts managing freight schedules for a warehouse near Hartsfield-Jackson. Sandra sold beauty products online, did part-time real estate staging, and liked to tell people she was building an empire. I admired that hustle. Back then, I thought admiration and love were the same thing. When we met, none of this seemed possible. Sandra had a laugh that could pull attention from 3 tables away and a smile that made every room look warmer. I met her at a Juneteenth festival in Piedmont Park. She was wearing gold hoops and a white sundress, and I spilled red soda on my own shirt trying to act smooth. She laughed so hard she had to lean on my arm. That should have embarrassed me, but somehow it made me feel chosen. We ended the night sharing wings at a late-night spot on Cascade Road, talking like we had known each other longer than a few hours. The first years were beautiful in an ordinary, hard-working way. We took weekend drives to Savannah and argued over whether the riverfront candy shops were charming or overpriced traps for tourists. She said I drove like an old church deacon. I told her she gave directions like a drill sergeant with an attitude problem. One night in a cheap hotel, she danced barefoot on the carpet to an old Anita Baker song, and I remember thinking I would spend my whole life protecting that softness. Looking back, that was the first mistake. Love should be shared, not carried alone like a box with no handles. We built routines that looked solid from the outside. I paid the mortgage, most of the bills, and the repairs. Sandra handled decor, birthdays, holiday tables, and every detail that made our house feel presentable. To the neighborhood, we looked balanced. Inside the marriage, it was different. Every time I came home tired, she called me low energy. Every time I tried to save money, she called me small-minded. When I suggested patience, she said I was afraid of success. The insults wore expensive perfume. They came wrapped in jokes, eye rolls, and little comments that sounded harmless if you were not the one hearing them every day. Sandra's sisters, Tasha and Nicole, made everything worse. They treated marriage like a competition show, and Sandra loved performing for them. If I bought a used truck instead of a new one, they clowned me in the family chat. If I spent Saturday fixing our fence instead of taking Sandra to brunch in Buckhead, they called me Mr. Practical. They said it with that sugar-coated meanness some people use when they want to cut you and still look cute doing it. I laughed along longer than I should have. Sometimes men mistake endurance for strength. Sometimes we stay because leaving feels like failing. The first serious crack came after Sandra started working with a real estate investor named Donnell Price out of Marietta. She said he was helping her think bigger. Suddenly everything in our home became too small, too slow, too ordinary for her. The couch was tired. The neighborhood was beneath her. My job was clock-in thinking. She talked like she had already moved on from the life we were still living. Donnell started showing up in stories before he showed up in facts. His name drifted around our kitchen like smoke. I asked once whether there was something going on. She laughed in my face. I should have listened to the part of me that already knew. Instead, I doubled down. I took extra shifts. I tried to be softer. I planned a dinner at a jazz spot in downtown Atlanta, wore the blue button-down she liked, and even brought flowers, which felt corny enough that I almost turned around. She looked beautiful that night, and for 2 hours I let myself believe we had found each other again. She teased me for mispronouncing a wine on the menu, and I told her all expensive grape juice tasted like regret anyway. She laughed so hard she snorted. I remember that sound now like a cruel souvenir. The collapse happened on a Thursday. I had been working 14 days straight because 2 supervisors were out sick and freight deadlines were stacked. Around noon, I felt a stabbing pain under my ribs, then dizziness, then the concrete rushing up at me. The next thing I remember clearly was fluorescent light, the smell of antiseptic, and a nurse saying, "Stay with me, baby." I had torn tissue in my side when I fell and aggravated an old back injury I had ignored for years. It hurt to breathe. It hurt to move. It even hurt to think about getting out of that bed. Sandra showed up at the hospital dressed too well for a crisis. Full lashes, matching handbag, bright nails, and that irritated expression she wore when life inconvenienced her. She stood at the end of the bed like I had called her to a boring meeting. When the doctor explained my recovery would take weeks and I would need help at home, she sighed louder than she spoke. She asked whether this meant I would be laid up and whether workers' compensation paid on time. The doctor looked uncomfortable. I looked at the ceiling. Even then, some part of me was still trying to protect her from my disappointment. The next morning she took a picture while I was asleep. I know because the angle caught me with my mouth open and the hospital bracelet turned outward. She sent it to her sisters, her cousins, and people from church, then wrote, "This is what carrying a man looks like." Somebody added laughing emojis. One cousin wrote, "Girl, trade him in." Sandra replied, "Already did." I found all this when my phone was returned after a scan. Pain medication can blur words, but not humiliation. There is a special kind of loneliness in seeing people you fed at cookouts enjoy your weakness like halftime entertainment. By evening, Sandra was gone. No bag packed for me. No ride arranged. No extra shirt. Nothing. A nurse named Loretta, who had the voice of every stain auntie in Georgia combined, noticed my face and asked what was wrong. I showed her the messages. She pressed her lips together so tight I thought they might disappear. Then she said, "Baby, some folks are allergic to decency." It was the first thing that made me laugh, and even that hurt because laughing pulled at my stitches. Loretta helped me call my Aunt Charlene in Decatur. Blood showed up. Marriage didn't. Aunt Charlene arrived in slippers, a church t-shirt, and enough righteous anger to power the whole ward. She looked at my chart, looked at me, and said, "So this fool left you? Good. Now we know what kind of devil wears lip gloss." I almost laughed again. Aunt Charlene never wasted a clean insult when a dainty one would do. She helped me get discharged, argued with billing on my behalf, and tucked my medicine instructions into her purse like they were court evidence. On the ride to her apartment, every bump in the road felt like punishment. I stared out the window at Atlanta traffic and wondered how my life had become something I didn't recognize. Going home was worse. Sandra had changed the locks before I got there. My duffel bag sat on the porch under a patio chair like forgotten laundry. Through the front window, I could see my framed college photo turned face down on the bookshelf. That small detail hurt more than the bag. Donnell opened the door wearing my Falcons hoodie and holding a glass of orange juice like he paid taxes there. He smiled the smile of a man who mistakes access for victory. Sandra stood behind him, arms folded, and said I could pick up the rest of my little stuff once I texted first. There are pains you can point to and pains that move around. My side hurt when I stood. My back hurt when I slept. But the deepest pain arrived when I checked our bank account from Aunt Charlene's couch and saw less than $200 left. Sandra had drained nearly everything, including money I had saved for property taxes and my physical therapy deductible. She did not even leave enough for dignity. I called once, and she sent me to voicemail. Then she texted, "You'll figure it out. You always do." That was Sandra's gift, turning my reliability into the weapon she used against me. Recovery made the days long and the nights mean. Physical therapy in Decatur was humbling in a way I had never known. I went from lifting freight schedules and solving problems to struggling with resistance bands and grimacing through steps. The clinic had a retired Marine named Mr. Benny who flirted with every nurse under 80 and insisted all healing required either prayer or proper seasoning. One day he watched me struggle to sit down and said, "But making that face won't help. You look like you smelled unseasoned potato salad." I laughed so hard I cried. It was the first honest laugh I'd had in weeks. In between the pain and rehab, Memory kept playing tricks on me. It would show me Sandra before she became cruel, like the time we got caught in summer rain outside a food truck festival in Midtown. We ran laughing to my truck, soaked through, and she kissed me in the parking lot like nobody else existed. Another memory would come right after, sharper and uglier, of her rolling her eyes when I asked where she'd been last month. That was the hardest part. Losing a person is one thing. Losing the version of them you loved is another. Grief gets heavier when it argues with your memories. Friends split in ugly ways. My barber, Leon, slipped me 5 free cuts and told me not to let heartbreak make me look defeated. My old coworker Curtis did the opposite. He had known about Donnell for months and said nothing because, in his words, I didn't want to get in your business. That sentence taught me something expensive. Silence is not neutrality when betrayal is already in the room. Sandra's sisters kept posting little digs online about glow-ups and deadweight. I blocked them one by one. Healing is not just about what you survive. It's also about what access you finally revoke. The truth really started opening up when Aunt Charlene made me sit at her kitchen table with a folder, a pen, and every bank statement I could pull. She fried catfish while I highlighted charges, and the whole apartment smelled like grease, lemon pepper, and justice. We found hotel charges in Birmingham, expensive dinners in Buckhead, gas receipts in Marietta, and cash transfers I never authorized. Sandra had not just cheated. She had subsidized the cheating with my labor. That changed something in me. Pain can make you passive. Evidence can wake you up. By date, I was no longer crying. I was planning. Attorney Denise Holloway worked out of a small office near downtown and spoke like every word had somewhere important to be. She looked over my records, my screenshots, and Sandra's messages, then leaned back and said, "She's not careless. She's arrogant. That helps us." Denise explained dissipation of marital assets, lockout violations, and what judges think about spouses who humiliate injured partners in writing. For the first time since the hospital, I felt the ground under me. Denise did not sell revenge. She sold clarity. There is something holy about a person who can hand you a legal pad and make your chaos sound like a case. Sandra, meanwhile, kept performing. She posted date nights with Donnell from restaurants in Sandy Springs, captions about choosing peace, and selfies in my old passenger seat like theft was a love language. She never apologized, not even once. When Denise served the papers, Sandra texted me, "You really doing all this because I moved on?" It took discipline not to answer in anger. I finally replied, "No, I'm doing this because you stole." Her response came back fast, cried to the judge. No remorse, no shame, just the confidence of a person who thinks charm can outtalk consequences. Some people only believe in gravity after they fall. While the case moved, I rebuilt small things first. I learned how to get out of bed without bracing like an old man. I started walking farther each week. I made coffee for Aunt Charlene before she woke up, and she pretended not to be impressed, though she once said, "Look at you, domestic and upright." At rehab, I met a transportation coordinator named Lena who came by to help patients arrange rides to dialysis and follow-up appointments. She had kind eyes, braids always tied back, and a laugh that started in her chest and rolled out slow. She talked to me like I was wounded, not broken. Lena did not flirt with me at first, which is part of why I trusted her. She asked practical questions, remembered details, and once brought me a black coffee without asking because she had seen me drinking it during intake. One afternoon, when I was frustrated after a bad therapy session, she pointed at a little old man speed walking the hallway with a walker and whispered, "You see Mr. Jenkins?" He cussed out 3 nurses and still asked for peach cobbler. Healing is ugly, not elegant. I laughed so suddenly I almost dropped my cane. That laughter felt different from survival. It felt like room opening up. Denise's investigation revealed that Donnell was not the polished entrepreneur Sandra bragged about. He was drowning in debt, behind on child support in Alabama, and being chased by 2 lenders over a failed trucking venture. Sandra had been using our money to cover hotel stays, car payments, and deposits for a short-term rental he claimed would become an Airbnb business. She had even signed for a luxury SUV in her name because his credit was shot. That was the affair's secret center, Not passion, but fantasy financed by theft. When I learned that, I stopped feeling replaced. I started feeling used, which was somehow cleaner. The blow-up came faster than even Denise expected. Donnell's ex in Birmingham found the rental agreement. His mis-support filings caught up with him, and one lender froze the account tied to the SUV. Another moved to repossess equipment from his failing company. Sandra called me that night, not to apologize, but to accuse me of messing with her life. I told her I had done nothing except tell the truth to my lawyer. She hissed that I had always been jealous of bigger people. Then she hung up. That was Sandra to the end. Even at the edge of disaster, she treated consequences like personal attacks. Court was not cinematic. No gasps. No speeches. No dramatic slam of folders. Just fluorescent lights, paper shuffling, and a judge with a tired face who had clearly seen every kind of selfishness before breakfast. Denise laid out the timeline, the transfers, the lockout, the messages, and the hospital photo. Sandra tried to smile through it. She called me emotionally weak and said I was exaggerating because I could not handle being left. The judge did not look impressed. Facts have a way of drying out performance. By the time the hearing ended, Sandra's confidence looked borrowed and overdue. The ruling did not fix my pain, but it gave it shape. The judge credited the drained funds against Sandra's share, ordered reimbursement where possible, and noted her conduct without mercy. She lost her claim to most of the remaining equity in the house because of the financial misconduct, and the lockout hurt her further. Donnell vanished almost immediately after his money trouble exploded. Men like that leave as quickly as they arrive. Sandra was left with a repossessed SUV, bad debt, and the kind of silence that follows loud foolishness. She still did not apologize. Last I heard, she blamed me, the court, and haters in one sentence. My comeback was quiet. Workers' compensation and the settlement from the warehouse injury gave me breathing room, and the months around hospitals had shown me something practical. Too many patients in Atlanta struggled just getting to appointments. With Denise's help and Aunt Charlene's relentless supervision, I bought one used wheelchair-accessible van and started a small non-emergency medical transport company. I named it Listen Transit Services, which sounded more important than it was in the beginning. At first it was just me, a clipboard, and early mornings. But I knew punctuality, paperwork, and dignity. Sometimes success is simply doing one honest thing well for people who need it. The business grew because I treated folks the way I had wanted to be treated when I was hurting. I showed up early. I learned regular client stories. I kept bottled water in the van and gospel low on the radio unless somebody requested old-school R&B. Dialysis patients started asking for me by name. Then a rehab center contract came through. Then a veterans clinic route. Then 2 more vans. Nothing about it was flashy. That was the beauty of it. I was no longer performing manhood for anybody. I was building something steady, private, and useful. Peace, I learned, likes a quiet room. A year later, I stood in the kitchen of my new house in Fayetteville while Lena laughed at me for burning garlic bread I had bragged about like it was gourmet. She opened windows, rescued dinner, and kissed me with flour on her cheek and no drama in her spirit. Outside, the night was still. Inside, everything that once felt broken had become instructive. Sandra had wanted a spectacle, and she got consequences. I wanted my life back, and I got better than that. Wisdom, honest love, and work that meant something. The moral is simple. Never beg to stay where your suffering is entertainment. Leave, heal, and let truth do the heavy lifting. If you made it to the end, you're officially family now. So hit like and subscribe, and come back for more love, betrayal, and the kind of karma that always shows up dressed nice.